Big tech, Google, Facebook, Twitter, and others have been able to grow to dominate the marketplace because they are protected from liability under Section 230. If we don't aggressively address their liability protection, they will continue to grow and continue to dominate and push out competition. Even if you break them up and separate them like the majority contends using antitrust provisions, and they still have liability protection under Section 230, the same thing's going to happen because they're barred from being sued. If Twitter and Facebook can editorialize, censor, and edit content, then why should they be treated different than news networks and newspapers that do the same thing? I have a bill that very narrowly goes in and reforms Section 230. It doesn't do away with it. It's called the Kasich Act. It's H.R. 285. It provides a private right of cause of action for anybody that feels, or business that feels, that their rights under the First Amendment have been violated, and gives that private right of cause of action. I encourage any members of this committee that want to work on this issue. I'd be happy to work with any members on either side of the aisle. My first question is for Mr. Thorne. Big tech has discriminated against conservatives in a variety of ways, including deplatforming them, suspending accounts like they did to the former president, and other similar actions. What are practical ways to stop big tech censorship without creating obstacles for small startup companies?
So I am at a personal level concerned about that, and I didn't prepare to talk about that at this hearing, but I do think if we address the underlying problem of, pick on Google for example, if it is the gatekeeper to where you get the information, you get to the status of becoming a verb, if there was competition against Google, that would be a much less serious problem. But I think it's a serious problem.
And you've spoken about the financial obstacles in the antitrust cases. And in your written testimony, you mentioned how the state of Texas was afraid that it couldn't match a tech giant in a long, drawn-out litigation. Beyond better financing for DOJ or state legal efforts, what can be done consistent with free market principles to create a fair playing field in such a situation and actually combat antitrust when it occurs?
I actually think if we win these cases, we will have done an awful lot of good as a starting point. But there are more cases. I'm concerned about what Apple's about to do to free apps on its platform. There are more cases to be brought. These things take resources, and I've been as creative as I can be. But I think at the level of if you believe this is important, I mean, you believe the Constitution is important. I believe a market economy is important. There should be real enforcement here, and that takes resources. It is not something that self-polices. It requires vigilance, as my friend would say.
Well, can you talk further about the potential downsides of creating a new federal agency to address these issues?
Oh, so Bill Barr's favorite former Attorney General is Robert H. Jackson. Last week at Judge Merrick Garland's confirmation hearing, he brought up Robert H. Jackson as a model for enforcement. Robert H. Jackson convinced his president at the time to hold off on regulation. Let's not run the price in terms of how people operate. Let's try antitrust first. And I would recommend that. I mean, you should consider with the tools that Congress has. You should consider all the different things that make sense. But if antitrust works, you don't need to set up an agency that stays there forever.